Welcome to App Stories, a weekly exploration of the world of apps. Today's show is brought to you by Fantastical, Mac Stadium, and Things. I'm John Voorhees, and with me, as always, is Federico Viticci. Hey, Federico.
Hello, John. How are you?
Good. Congratulations on the iOS and iPadOS 14 review. It's finally out there, right?
It's here. It's live. As you're listening to this, you probably landed on the homepage on the first page of the review, and where you found this episode of App Stories embedded within the page. So yes, it's live. About a month late. I think exactly a month late. Actually,
yeah, I guess that's right.
Wow. Well, to be fair, I've been pretty consistent. Months ago, I said I think and I hope that iOS will come out in mid-October. And go figure, it took me until mid-October to actually finish the review. So my estimates were correct.
You have a little experience with this stuff.
Yeah, I think this means that I kind of know my schedule and myself at this point. And the only problem is that I was a month late compared to the early release of iOS 14, but that's fine. I hope it will be fine. And we're going to talk about the review in a few minutes, but overall, I just want to say that I'm super thankful for the people who have been interested and have been patient enough, waiting for the review, saying really nice things to me, like take all the time you need until you're happy with it. And I'm really happy with it. I need to say that I'm really happy with the review. There's nothing else that I would change at this point. It's in the kind of a relatively good shape that I'm comfortable with. I'm happy with the flow, I'm happy with the content, and I'm happy with all the work that we put into it, and I'm happy with all the perks and the exclusive things that we're going to talk about shortly that we were able to offer this year. So, yeah, it was a long process.
Yeah, it definitely was. And I do want to say, though, that I kind of take issue with your statement that it's late, because it's not really late. You never said when it was coming out. And while it is nice to have it come out day and date with the actual release of the OS, the thing is that we had less time, you had less time to test it this summer, and you've got a review that was ready when it was ready, when you could put everything into it and have something more than just a summary of what the features are, but actually some really great insights as to what it all means and how it fits together in the bigger picture, which, look, I think this is one of your best reviews. I really have enjoyed reading it. I'm really looking forward to sitting down and reading it end to end, front to back, in the ebook version that we did for club members, because, as we do the production of this in the run up to actually publishing it, I end up reading it in chunks, kind of all out of order. And I really am looking forward to taking a little time, sitting down on a weekend afternoon and just reading straight through it.
Yeah, it's, as I work on this over the summer, I share, bits of little passages of the review with you and with Mike and Steven and Ryan. Of course, Ryan has been an amazing help in editing the review from top to bottom, multiple times even. It was a long process over, and I'm gonna share all the details of the making of and the image upload catastrophe that happened at the very last moment that required me to come up with an entirely new system.
It's a fun weekend.
It was a fun week that will be discussed in MacStories Weekly for club members this Saturday, as well as MacStories Unplugged, which is also our members-only podcast. But yeah, it was a very eventful weekend a few days ago. And I guess in terms of what you said about this review is not late because you never promised a release date, I think what I'm gonna say is that if other events in my life didn't happen over the past couple of months, this review could have been out, I don't know, October 1st, right?
Right.
But I had to take care of other things. And so, as I mentioned on App Stories Unconnected before, those things were more important. And for this reason, the review is, comes out today rather than 2 weeks ago. But like I said, I'm really happy with it. I reached the stage where I know that I'm done, where I look at it, I look at my draft, and I'll be like, maybe I could tweak this thing over here. Maybe I could add a little section there. And that's when I know, no, stop, you're done. This is finished. You got to put it out.
You really do have to do that, because if you really get to, I've done that where I get to the point where I just pick at something and then all of a sudden you're making it worse, not better. So, all right, Federico, we ought to run through really quickly what the perks are for club members. You want to hit those?
Oh, yes. So Well, I guess the big new thing this year is that we don't just have one ebook. We don't just have two ebooks. We have three ebooks for members.
Yes, all the great ebooks. Oh my gosh.
All the ebooks. Come here. We have books for you. Obviously, if you want to read the review in an ebook form, so if you want to read it in the it's an EPUB, so you can read it in the Kindle app. You can read it in the Apple Books app, which is my favorite way of reading it. You can get the ebook version if you're a Club MacStories member. You can sign up even just for a month, and you can get all these perks, $5 a month. But of course, ideally, we would like you to stay for the full year because we have perks and exclusive content all year long. But that's the primary perk, I guess, of the review is the ebook version. You can get it's the same content, right? Same text, all the images, galleries, videos,
right?
All the footnotes and aside, the info boxes, all of those are in there. That's the first ebook. The second one is a collection of all the iOS, iPadOS, and macOS related stories that John, Ryan, and Alex have published over the summer at MacStories while I was busy working on the review. We did an entire series we call it the Summer OS previews. So this is the 2020 version of that. And all those stories have been updated and edited again and collected in a second ebook that you can also find in your Club MacStories membership downloads area. Now, this year, we also have a third ebook, which is the surprise. As those who pay attention to the many sometimes silly things I say on podcasts may not be so surprised by this. So I had this idea of there's this big review, right? And lots of people read the review, fortunately. But it's a long form story. And it takes, you gotta plan for it. You sit down and you gotta, know that it's gonna take you several hours to get through.
Right.
But what if you just want to get the good stuff right away, right? What if you just want to get those tips and tricks and those details? So I thought, as I was editing the review, I made a separate note in Apple Notes, right there by the side of my iPad Pro, and I saved 40 of those tips and tricks for iOS and iPadOS 14. So the third ebook is called 40 Tips for iOS and iPadOS 14, and it's a collection organized by app or by system feature of these little details, these little, less known features that you can find in iOS and iPadOS 14 with screenshots, with details. So, they could be settings or hidden options in apps, hidden gestures, for example. 40 tips, 40 of my favorite hidden things in iOS and iPadOS 14. And that's the third ebook. And I think it's super fun. It's very lightweight. You can get through it in like an hour. And you can, I think you will find a lot of hidden gems in there.
Yeah, that's a really great idea. I was glad that you did that this year because it is a nice way to kind of, especially even if you read the long form version first, it's nice to have a way to go back and find those little gems very quickly afterwards in this other book. So that's really nice.
There's a lot more. Would you want to go ahead with with the second perk?
All right. Well, Federico had another surprise for everybody, which is a set of fantastic iPhone home screen wallpapers made by our designer, Sylvia Gatta. And Sylvia has put together these amazing wallpapers that they're a little hard to describe. I was trying to write about them, and because what they are is there are two different diagonal gradients with beautiful colors.
Yes.
And then in the center is kind of, I guess you would call it like a platform for your icons and your widgets.
Yes,
right?
That is a platform. Yes.
Right. So they sit there, and then there's room at the bottom for the dock. So it looks really neat once you do it. Now, these are, in order to get the effect right, you have to, when you install these, they're very much made for the home screen and not the lock screen because they're designed to have a platform for the apps and the widgets. But you have to install it by, you have to do the pinch in to zoom in to make sure, or I guess that's zoom out.
To zoom out.
Yes. Right. To make sure that the platform is there and fully visible in the middle of the screen. And once you do that, it just looks fantastic. And in addition to, so there are these two different variants with colors that are a diagonal gradient. And they have platforms. One is like a transparent platform, and the other is a dark platform. It's like a very dark gray that looks really handsome in the middle there. And then there's a third option, which is the total dark mode version, which is like two different shades of very dark gray that looks really great, especially with a lot of the dark mode widgets that have that kind of dark gray background to them. It looks fantastic for that.
Yeah. You know what? The best way to see what these wallpapers look in practice, just read through the review, because across multiple pages, I made sure to use all the different versions of these wallpapers in my screenshots. So as you run through the chapters and the sections, you will find these wallpapers used in practice with my screenshots. So yeah, I'm using this myself and I love them. It's a bummer that we were not able to do them for iPad, because it just, on iPad it just kind of feels like a waste of efforts, with the column. But yeah, we have some additional ideas for wallpapers for the future, so stay tuned. But in the meantime, these are for club members, and you can also download them.
And nice. I'm using the one that's kind of red, that transitions from red to purple. I like that one a lot.
I use that one too at the moment. Yeah, it's very nice looking, and that gray color, by the way, is specifically optimized to blend in with certain widgets, such as
like
Soar,
maybe,
for example. Yes, it's done on purpose. Yes. So you mentioned the wallpapers. I guess I'm gonna go ahead with the third perk. We are going to share our usual in-depth making of the review in MacStories Weekly, where I will detail all the things that I've done for the research stage and the writing process and the editing process. And I can tell you up front that this year, the research stage and the editing process were vastly different from last year. The writing one was pretty much consistent with the iOS 13 review, but I made some changes to how I got all my notes together in the research phase. And obviously, as I mentioned, there was a bit of a problem with images at the very last moment, and I needed to come up with something else. And so I will talk about that in the making of in MacStories Weekly out this Saturday. And lastly, also in MacStories Weekly, Brian will share the details. Brian King, our 3D and motion artist, who brought the review to life with this excellent 3D animation and all the 3D graphics. All the images that you see, all the cover images in the chapters, those are actually all 3D scenes that were captured in Cinema 4D and a bunch of other apps. And Brian will once again share the screenshots and the details of the behind the scenes. These are actual scenes, like there's a virtual camera, there's virtual lighting, and these devices are actually arranged in a 3D space. It's kind of wild. Whenever Brian shares the photos of his setup, it's like having like a virtual photo studio on a computer.
Right. It really is.
It's really incredible.
He's really outdone himself this year with these. I think these are by far the best. I mean, they just look.
I agree.
They just look so good. And of course, when that issue of MacStories Weekly comes out on Saturday, that's when we'll release Unplugged as well, which is kind of, it's a little bit behind the scenes, but it's also like a debriefing. It's how did it go this year, Federico, which I always enjoy doing because I like to hear. I mean, you and I talk all through the summer about it, but I like to kind of pick your brain and see how things go at the end of the process and talk about kind of the lessons learned. So we'll do that as well.
Yeah.
This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Flexibits, the makers of Fantastical and CardHop. Fantastical Premium launched earlier this year, and it's a major upgrade to the Apple Design Award-winning calendar and task app. It's a subscription for about $3 a month that includes all of Apple's platforms, the Mac, the iPhone, the iPad, and even the Apple Watch. And everything syncs beautifully. There's even a family plan for up to 5 members of a family that get their own Flexibits account for just about $5 per month. I'm a longtime user of Fantastical. What I like about it, first of all, of course, is the design. This app has been gorgeous for years. It's one of the best apps on all platforms in terms of its UI. It's easy to read and beautiful to look at. I also like that it shows me the weather. It's part of the premium package, and it will give you a great overview of your week. Is it going to rain today? Is it going to rain tomorrow? It's a great way to understand what's happening, and the fact that it integrates with reminders. You can have your reminders right in there with the events of your calendar, or you can turn that off if you don't want to see your reminders. It's really simple. Of course, there's also calendar groups. Calendar groups are a way to put together different calendars you have. Calendars are like email accounts. They tend to multiply over time. Some of them are related to work, some your personal life. And with calendar groups, you can put them together in a way that makes sense to you and switch between them with ease. Fantastical just got a big iOS 14 update too. It's got widgets, of course, some fantastic widgets to be able to see what's going on with your schedule right from your home screen. And there's Scribble support on the iPad, which means you can use your Apple Pencil to jot down your appointments. Flexibits has a special offer just for App Stories listeners. That's 20% off monthly or annual plans, including the family plans. So you either get 20% off a single month, so there's no commitment, or 20% off an entire year, which is by far the best deal, almost 50% off the standard monthly price. This offer will only be available for a really limited time, so start your 14-day free trial right now to give it a try. Just go to flexibits.com/appstories so they know you came from the show and you can get that special deal. And make sure you spell that right too. Flexibits with an I in the middle. flexibits.com/appstories. Again, that URL to get a 14-day free trial and to link to an additional 20% off is flexibits.com/appstories. Our thanks to Flexibits for their support of the show. All right, Federico, let's dive into the review. I mean, we cannot go through every last detail in this review because it's a very long review. I think I did the stats for you yesterday, and there's roughly 60,000 words in this.
Yes.
So,
yes.
So we're not gonna cover 60,000 words.
It's shorter than last
today.
year. It is shorter than last year.
Yes, and we managed to do a show last year, so we'll be able to do a show this year too. Mm-hmm. But I thought we would concentrate on a few different areas, and I really want to start with you with design and compact UI because I know that this is one of the very big themes that comes out in the review. And there's, when you think about it, like when I think compact UI, the first thing I think about is phone calls, but then and maybe shortcuts. But in reality, once you look through Federico's review, you'll see that this is actually in a bunch of different places throughout the system. And I think it's interesting to see how many places it's been used, how it's been used, and maybe think about where it might be going.
Yeah, it's one of those things that you need to pay attention to understand that it's an underlying theme and it's an idea that has been developed by different teams at Apple and is actually, gaining a foothold in the OS in different places. And it's one of those changes that may not appear as a big deal up front, but if you actually pay attention and consider the ramifications of it, I think it's something that we'll need to keep an eye on for the next few years as a potential new way of designing software. Maybe, and this is one of the speculations, one of the ideas that I share in the review, maybe for devices, future devices where you're going to have a smaller screen and you're going to need a compact UI that is glanceable and dynamic and really small, but still useful at the same time. So you mentioned phone calls. Obviously, now that, when you're using your iPhone or iPad, now phone calls come in as this sort of unobtrusive banners from the top of the screen, sort of like a notification. Mm-hmm. And you can interact with those right away. You can swipe them into the status bar to ignore a phone call, or you can pick up and put it on speaker. And it's super easy to do. But also like picture in picture, right? Picture in picture on iPhone follows the same idea of allowing the user to keep doing what they're doing, but also multitask on an iPhone and keep enjoying, for example, in this case, a video in a very compact UI element. And you can make the picture, picture in picture is not a new thing, right? It's been available on the Mac and iPad for years now. But on the iPhone, you can make it super small. And you can have this really, really small video player that you can just fling around the screen and put it in a corner. And you can keep watching a video as you're doing something else. And of course, if you have a big phone, and this year the biggest phone is getting even bigger, you can imagine that there's plenty of space to use picture in picture. And Siri and shortcuts are actually related to each other because obviously Siri and shortcuts, both teams, they work together, as shortcuts has a really deep integration with the assistant. But the idea being that shortcuts, whenever you run a shortcut now, all the actions that the shortcut presents are now displayed to you as these compact elements. So lists that come down from the top of the screen, or these smaller input fields, the native date picker that doesn't have a date and time wheel anymore. And these compact UI elements, you always see them regardless of whether you run the shortcut from, which means that if you run a shortcut from the share sheet in iOS 14, you're not presented with the whole list of actions that run from top to bottom, right? You don't see the execution of a shortcut anymore, which slows you down. It's like unnecessary information. You just see a compact banner that says, yeah, the shortcut is running, and it feels faster and it doesn't waste space on the screen. And same with Siri. When you ask a question to Siri now, it used to be that before, Apple was sort of, in a way, kind of overcompensating for your request. And so, like, if you ask, I don't know, how old is Barack Obama, for example, you will get this entire presentation card where Siri would say, Barack Obama is 59 years old, and also, here's his entire bio in this Siri snippet. Whereas now, Siri does the opposite. It gives you just the detail you want. So compact UI means a smaller banner that gets to the core of your request and says, yeah, Barack Obama is 59 years old. And then optionally, if you want to get more details, you can tap in and navigate to a secondary page. So really, it's sort of like the opposite way of like, we have the details, but we're not showing you all the details up front because maybe you don't need them. You just ask about a person's age. We're going to give you a person's age. And lastly, search. So search, in the context of compact UI, it means that it really comes down to the quick launcher, I think, and top hits. So the idea that on iPhone, it's super easy to launch apps and websites now. And results are more compact in that search does try to nail down better than before what exactly you're looking for. So it defaults to showing you fewer sections and fewer categories than iOS 13. But really, the effect is a lot more noticeable on iPad, where search is essentially now Spotlight. It's a floating search bar that comes up in the middle of the screen. It's not a full screen UI that takes over what you're doing. It's a floating thing that comes out. You can search and then you can dismiss it right away, or you can pick up results and drag them away on the iPad. It's super well done.
Yeah, it really is. And it reminds me a lot of things like, the tools that we've had, like Spotlight and Alfred and those sorts of things.
Yeah.
Going back for a second to Siri, it really, it's really, I think, important to note that this isn't just a matter of the results card being shortened. They're actually able to figure out what you want. So your Barack Obama example is right. I mean, it's not, if you ask for his age, you get his age. You don't just get like the first 3 lines of his bio where the age might be or might not be, depending on where the information's coming from. So it's really well done in that way. I like it a lot. And the other point, I guess, is on picture-in-picture with video. You're not going to want to watch a blockbuster movie for 2 hours on your phone in the corner of your screen, but it's super handy if you're like, I don't know, maybe you're watching a video on YouTube or Twitch or something like that, and you throw something up into the corner and just to answer a text message or maybe take a note in the Notes app or something like that. It's perfect for that sort of thing. So I've been really happy having that because that's the kind of thing I do a lot on my Mac, for instance, but until this, haven't been able to do on the iPhone.
Yeah. I've been watching a lot of Twitch streams on the iPhone thanks to picture-in-picture, super well done, and very nice that even before Twitch was updated for iOS 14, because they're using the native system video player, right? They get the picture-in-picture behavior for free. And so even during the summer, like in July, this was already supported in iOS 14. So yeah, I think compact UI, to sum up, I really do feel like we're going to see more and more, and this is one of the takeaways from the review, we need to pay attention to how Apple will redesign certain functionalities to move away from full screen interfaces that block your interactions and sort of approaching this in a different way using floating elements, popovers, banners that pop down from the top of the screen, all these different ways of designing more transient UIs. I think it's really super important. And you can see one example right away in the upcoming iOS 14.2. The AirPlay picker in Apple Music is no longer a full screen thing. It's a popover. And I think we are going to see more and more of these new approaches to redesigning existing functionalities.
I'm going to give everybody a top tip too, which is if you run across a video player on the web that doesn't use the native video player on iOS, take a look at an app called Fullifier, which came out just like a week or two ago. It's a free download, and it automatically switches to the official controls, which I like a lot. This episode of App Stories is brought to you by MacStadium. MacStadium is the leading provider of Apple Mac infrastructure as a service. Whether you need a single Mac Mini or a fully scalable Mac private cloud, MacStadium can help you move your iOS and Mac app development out from under your desk and into the cloud. MacStadium is the only provider of enterprise-class Apple Mac infrastructure as a service. Think AWS or Azure, but built with Mac hardware. MacStadium has years of expertise in doing this with companies like Capital One, Dropbox, Shopify, Pandora, and a whole lot more. And they support many of your favorite development tools too, like Homebrew and Node.js. You could start with a single Mac Mini if you're a small team or just need a hosted Mini for your personal use. However, they can also provide you with a scalable private cloud that can go from one Mac to thousands with dedicated firewalls, super fast storage, and a global footprint in data centers all over the world. And with MacStadium, you get private dedicated hardware and the same level of security you would get at AWS or Azure. In other words, they have a whole lot of security certifications. Want to move your iOS and Mac app development to the cloud? Just talk to MacStadium. Learn more about MacStadium's infrastructure at macstadium.com/appstories. Make sure you use that URL so they know you came from the show. And for listeners of this show, MacStadium is offering 2 months for the price of one on a Mac Mini subscription. Just enter the promo code AppStories at checkout. Again, that URL to learn more about MacStadium and to take advantage of that special deal is macstadium.com/appstories. Our thanks to MacStadium for their support of the show. All right, Federico, I want to switch on over to the iPad because, I think one of the things about the iPad and iPadOS is now, we've had a separate OS now for just over a year, and I feel like it's still looking to find its identity, and I think that's part of what this year was about. I think that's kind of where you take this in your review. What can you tell us about what is new in iPadOS and how it's designed to kind of set it apart from the iPhone?
Yeah, so I think Apple this year is sort of continuing the journey that they started last year in terms of in the iPad's identity, finding the iPad's identity and now that we're into the second decade of the iPad. And last year, I think we can consider two important steps in this journey. Last year, with iPadOS 13, of course, they split the platforms in two, so iOS and iPadOS. And on iPadOS, they launched multi-window, so the ability to open multiple windows for each app that supports the feature. That, up until last year, that was a Mac-only feature, and even just the thought of managing Windows on an iPad felt like crazy talk. Now it's a commonplace functionality, and I actually kind of depend on it myself. I used multi-window a lot this summer to work on the review. And earlier this year, the second important step was iPadOS 13.4 with the Magic Keyboard and the System Pointer. That actually laid the groundwork for WWDC and iPadOS 14. I really feel like it was necessary for Apple to get the pointer in place early so that in iPadOS 14 at WWDC, we can see the third step in this journey, which is we have focused on what happens around apps. So multitasking, split view, slide over, all the different ways that you can combine them. Then we added a pointer, and now we want you, the iPad app developers, to reconsider the inside of your apps. Sort of how do you actually design and lay out apps on iPad? And so the idea being here that Apple is pushing for a kind of iPad application design that is a mix of what came before, but also what could be on a Mac. Because iPad apps in 2020, they're not just iPad apps, right? They can be the foundation for a Mac Catalyst version, obviously, especially now that you have the optimized for Mac flavor of Catalyst, which is even better than before. And also, you're going to have the ability to run iPad apps on an Apple Silicon Mac. So it's not just an iPad app. It is an iPad app. It is a tablet app, and you can use it with touch. You can use it as you always did in full screen. You don't have to multitask. You don't have to use multi-window. However, at the same time, an iPad app in 2020 also carries the potential of becoming a desktop experience. And so with that mindset, Apple said, well, we want you to take better advantage of the screen on iPad. We want to move away from designs and interactions that are better suited for an iPhone. We want you to rethink how people interact with your apps on iPad. And so you see the new native sidebar, right? That works really well both with touch and with the pointer, which is one of the overarching themes of iPadOS this year. Apple, if you pay attention to all the features, all the iPadOS features that Apple has put out in the past year, all the new ones, they all work equally well with touch and with the pointer. Last year, multi-window, context menus, and this year, obviously, sidebars, toolbars, and multi-column. All of these new features, they are designed from the ground up with two input methods in mind. Obviously, the problem here is that existing features that have not been redesigned are now kind of sticking out, because now you look at things like slide over and split view and the way that you manage them, and you can tell right away, oh, this was designed years ago when we didn't have a pointer. And now those features that are only optimized for touch, they really do stick out now that we have touch and the native pointer. So that's one of the potential issues that I mentioned in the review. But really, the idea being that you now look at these iPad apps in 2020 and you see these three columns, right? These native multi-column layouts that are consistent between apps, because now developers don't have to make their own custom versions anymore. And you have pull-down menus, which take the best elements of context menus from last year and they apply them to toolbars. And you have the sidebars with support for expanding and collapsing sections, for example. And of course, you have support for long presses in the sidebar. So really, it's this cohesive vision of being able to use an iPad as a tablet, but also as this new kind of laptop device, which goes back to what I wrote in, what was it, April or May, when I reviewed the Magic Keyboard. I said, this is a new breed of laptop. And really, you can see that in iPadOS 14.
Yeah, I think it's an acknowledgement that the iPad is used probably more often in landscape than anything else. I mean, that's why we have and that's why we have a sidebar instead of a tab bar. I think you're not going to see a whole lot of tab bars anymore on the iPad. They're not. It's not that they don't exist. It's just that the sidebar is so much more functional for a screen that's used in landscape and is so much wider than it is tall. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And it's really been fascinating to both kind of follow your review and what's going on with iPadOS as I work on our Big Sur review, because there's some really interesting back and forth happening between the Mac and the iPad that I think is tying those platforms together much more tightly than ever before, and certainly more so now, I think, even than the connection between the iPhone and the iPad, really, when it comes right down to it. One of the things, I guess, that I am a little concerned about, though, is Apple perhaps maybe in a couple of places forcing differences between the iPad and the iPhone that don't necessarily have to be there, which, I guess the two things that come immediately to mind are the fact that the widgets are relegated to the sidebar of the home screen, and two, that there's no emoji search. I mean, what's up with that?
Yeah, I have no idea. It's there's a couple of features on iPad that are missing. I mean, one of them obviously is widgets on the home screen, and the other is emoji search. But like, I would understand why not having widgets mixed with app icons like that. I would understand if the reason was, yeah, we didn't have time. Like we ran out of time. We just wanted
Right.
to do it on the iPhone first. That's not what Apple said publicly, which I take issue with. But like, I get it. Okay, like it takes more time. They wanted to do something different on iPad. I suppose this is my assumption, so I get it. But emoji search, I really don't understand.
Right.
Why are we not able to search for emoji on an iPad? Like, honestly, it just feels like a bug. Like, I struggle to understand if there's a reason. I don't think there's any reason. I think it was either just like widgets, they ran out of time, or it's missing because it's a bug. Like, it makes no sense.
I know. Although it's not there in 14.2 either, is it?
No, it's not.
Okay, so I don't know about that bug theory, but maybe
Look,
you're late filing your radar.
I need to believe in something. Okay, so just
all right. This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Things from Cultured Code. Things is an incredible task manager for the iPhone, iPad, and Mac. If you're setting up your home screen on iOS 14, one app you should really check out is Things, because you know what? They have some of the most beautiful new widgets available. They're available in 3 sizes, and they can show you your to-do lists on your home screen, which is really convenient. See what you're working on today, see what's coming up tomorrow. View any project you want. You can even use tags to create a custom view yourself. You'll find that Things widgets are actually useful. They're not a gimmick. They provide important information at a glance. One of the great examples is the Deadlines widget, because Things lets you set a date for when things absolutely must be done. The problem was in the past that you had to actually open the app to see what those things happened to be, but now you don't. Now you have a widget, and that list can sit visibly right there on your home screen all day long, getting updated throughout the day. You can see your deadlines as they approach, so you never miss anything important. Not only do all the Things widgets update throughout the day, but they actually turn to dark mode automatically at nighttime, so your home screen always looks terrific. Things is a perfect app for managing your daily life. It's simple to use and beautifully designed. Head on over to their website, thingsapp.com, to learn more about their great new widgets and the other fantastic features. Or find it on the App Store by just searching Things. Our thanks to Things for their support of the show.
I also want to mention how on iPad, this is a big year for the Apple Pencil. If you're an Apple Pencil user, I think the changes in iPadOS 14 are as important as the pointer was for keyboard users in iPadOS 13.4. Specifically, the new Scribble feature of iPadOS, I think it's as important as the pointer from a few months ago. Scribble means that you now have universal Apple Pencil input support all across the system. You can handwrite anywhere in any text field, and your handwriting will be instantly converted to typed text. So Scribble is designed for people who use the Apple Pencil a lot, obviously, and who never want to put down the Apple Pencil, right? So it's presented as the kind of feature that allows you to keep going with the pencil without having to switch modes. So let's say you're drawing in Procreate, or you're sketching in Notes, or you're taking notes in Notability or GoodNotes. But then you realize, oh, I gotta respond to a message, or I need to do a Google search. And before, you needed to, put the pencil down somewhere, or just, put it behind your ear or something, I don't know, and just switch the iPad to software keyboard mode and type out what you needed to type out. With Scribble, you can keep using your pencil and actually scribble your message or your Google search or whatever, and that will be converted to text. So it's a way for you to never stop using the pencil, even for those times where you would have to use the software keyboard. Now, it is technically impressive, right? As a technology, it is really remarkable what Apple has been able to do here. It works anywhere. And there's the little details, the little adjustments that I cover in the review, like all those scenarios, those edge cases in which the system does the best, like takes the work away from you and allows you to always handwrite. All these little design details, like if you handwrite in a search field and the search field as a placeholder text, that placeholder text automatically disappears. And Scribble, the color of the ink automatically adapts to dark mode. Like all these little details that, the kind of things that I one of the reasons why I love reviewing Apple's operating system so much, right? Because all these edge cases are always considered. Now, Scribble is not the kind of feature for me because I don't really use the Apple Pencil. However, I made an effort in the review to talk about it and to underline how this is going to be a big deal for Apple Pencil users, of which there are a lot, like artists and students and, folks who take a lot of notes with the Apple Pencil. I mean, obviously, the Apple Pencil is, if not the most important, one of the two most important accessories for the iPad Pro and for the iPad Air and for all other iPads at this point. So Scribble is really remarkable. And there's also deeper integration with Apple Notes. So smart selection, allowing you to select your handwriting and copy that as text so that you can handwrite something in Notes and you can copy the typed text version and paste it anywhere in other apps. And also shape recognition, obviously helping you draw perfect squares and triangles and circles and stars and hearts and clouds and thinking bubbles, like really, really nicely done in Notes. And so, yeah, I feel like it's a big year for the Apple Pencil. And I think it's a nice 1-2 punch, with WWDC. Before WWDC, we got the pointer and now we got the Apple Pencil. Right. So Apple sort of updating all the input methods for iPadOS this year.
Well, let me ask you something about Scribble. I have a theory, which is that Scribble might be more useful for a smaller iPad where the iPad itself is easier to hold in your hand. Something like the new iPad Air, or maybe even the Mini for that matter. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think so. I think the more portable an iPad is, the better it is to use it as a sort of like a small notepad with an Apple Pencil. So I definitely think that it's going to be super convenient if you have an 11-inch iPad Pro or even an iPad Mini. I think it would be so nice to use an Apple Pencil with that. I don't use it that way myself because I don't need to. But that's also why I would love to see, right, eventually an iPad Mini with the iPad Pro design. That's sort of the dream device. And I can imagine using that device with an Apple Pencil. That would be incredible. So yeah, I do believe that maybe the 12.9-inch iPad Pro, not the best device to walk around and hold and use the Apple Pencil, but obviously the big iPad Pro, terrific for sitting at a desk and drawing and really taking your time in Procreate or apps like that.
Yeah, I think the dream of an iPad Pro style Mini is what's drawing me so closely to getting an iPad Air. I mean, I think that form factor, and it's not obviously nearly as small as the Mini, but that form factor has a lot of appeal to me, for especially with the iPad Air being one where the keyboard is a lot more usable and you could really turn it into kind of an ultra portable computer, I think. But that's a discussion for another day. All right, Federico, I don't want to spoil everything in the review for everybody, but of course people,
especially the conclusion.
Especially the conclusion. No, we won't do that. It's a great conclusion though. Let's talk about shortcuts, because people I'm sure are wondering what you think about shortcuts, because this was a little bit different year. There were fewer actions, but there were a lot of nice additions that make using the app a lot easier.
Yeah, lots of quality of life enhancements in shortcuts this year. Not as much of let's change how the editor looks, or let's add all of these new actions and major features like automations. No, the shortcuts team had a relatively quieter year in iOS and iPadOS 14, but there's still I guess my takeaway is that they focused on addressing the top feature requests, both by average users as well as power users. So obviously the big one, folders. You now have folders and shortcuts. Finally, you can organize your shortcuts in folders. Those folders sync with iCloud, and you can use folders with the widget, of course. It's beautiful. You can assign custom icons to folders. Really well done. Thank you, Apple. I now have all my folders, all my shortcuts organized in folders. Thank you very much. This needed to be done years ago. It's finally here. It makes sense. They're using the native sidebar. So I get it, why they wanted to wait. But, thank you regardless. This is really welcome. Now, in addition to folders, you now have things like multi-window on iPad. So you can open multiple shortcuts windows. You can even open the same editor window, so the same shortcut in two different windows. Now, changes will not be reflected on the other side right away, but still, you will not cause any problems by looking at the same shortcut in two different windows and making changes to one side of it. Changes will still be saved on the other side. And I think it's really impressive when, in the context of, if you're a power user and you're working on a long shortcut, it can really be beneficial to scroll the editor to two different spots, right, in a shortcut.
Absolutely.
And now with multi-window, you can do this. But not only that, you can also copy and paste actions between shortcuts and even between different places of the same shortcut. And this is the kind of feature that I never thought Apple would actually do, but they listen to power users, and now you can copy an action and paste the same action either in a different shortcut or elsewhere within the same shortcut. Now, Apple tries its best to preserve, for example, things like the actions configuration, right? So all the parameters that you set in the action will be saved in the pasted version as well. The only downside, which I mentioned in my review, which I hope Apple will fix next year, is that power users have long asked for the ability to copy and paste actions as a way to reuse entire groups of actions, right, between shortcuts. There's no multi-select in the current version of copy and paste. You can only copy and paste one action at a time. And even if you try and out-clever Apple and put actions within, say, a conditional block or a repeat block, and you think, oh, I'm so clever because now I can copy the block and the block with all the actions inside will be pasted. No, the block unfortunately will be pasted empty without the actions inside, which honestly, also that feels like a bug. It shouldn't be that way.
That is a little weird.
Because if I copy a block that contains stuff and I paste the block, it should be pasted alongside the stuff inside the block. So anyway, copy and paste, still amazing. And of course, there's a bunch of new actions. There's one major change to automations, which were introduced last year. Now, scheduled automations, so shortcuts that you want to run at a specific time of day, you can now finally run those automatically without your confirmation. So that used to be one of the major points of criticism last year. I want to run a shortcut on a schedule, but why does it keep asking for my confirmation? Now you can disable the confirmation and you can let shortcuts run at a specific time each day or on a particular weekly schedule, which is also new this year, without any confirmation whatsoever, which is super nice. And in terms of new actions, I think Apple is, this year, they have focused on expanding the integrations with other devices in the ecosystem. So I feel like the two most important ones are the new Apple Watch actions for setting watch faces, for enabling specific modes, and more Apple TV actions. And I understand that Apple is now looking at shortcuts as a way to sort of have this glue, right, between devices, allowing users to create these custom chains of actions to control a device that is paired with the same Apple ID, for example, that is on the same local network. I think it makes a lot of sense for shortcuts to have those kinds of integrations.
Yep.
And then there's a few nice additions like better reminders actions, Apple News and Stocks actions, all those kinds of smaller additions.
Well, I'm glad you'll be able to track your stocks even better now, Federico.
Sure. Business, really, really important. Yes.
All right. Well, that's probably a good place to wrap up for today, Federico. Of course, we had an Apple event yesterday, so we are going to be back, of course, on next Monday with probably some more stuff about the review, as well as what happened at the Apple event and anything else that may come up in the intervening days. I want to thank our 3 sponsors again for this episode, and that is Fantastical by Flexibits, Mac Stadium, and Things from Cultured Code. Of course, you can find me and Federico over at MacStories.net. Federico is on Twitter and Instagram, where he's at Viticci. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees. JOHNVOORHWS. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.